Welcome to the third of 3 modules developed in partnership among the Expanding Capacity in Environmental Education Initiative, or EE Capacity, Cornell University, the American Public Garden Association, and the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. This 3-part series aims to guide public garden educators as they seek to develop outreach programs aimed at improving environmental awareness. So the third module is called Laying the Groundwork, Introducing Children to Ecological Concepts Underlying Climate Change, and was developed in collaboration with the Chicago Botanic Garden. And I am Jennifer Schwartz-Ballard. I'm the Associate Vice President of Education at the Chicago Botanic Garden. And in this module, we'll be introducing age-appropriate environmental concepts in ways that begin to develop 5 to 8-year-olds' awareness and appreciation of the environment and provide the basis for their future development of a sophisticated understanding of the relationship between climate change, and its environmental impacts. There are many programs that engage middle and high school audiences with climate change, but few that are developmentally appropriate for young children or designed for implementation in an informal education setting. Some of the resources that are available for older audiences include the Climate Change in My Backyard curriculum developed by the Chicago Botanic Garden and the Pangea curriculum developed at Stanford University. NOAA and NASA both have extensive climate data and education resources available for formal educators, as does the Climate Literacy and Energy Awareness Network, also known as CLEAN. For the most part, however, they are not adapted for younger audiences. So by capturing the attention of members of this really young group, we can encourage them to become lifelong advocates on behalf of the environment. Likewise, there are many, many resources for introducing children to nature, but they don't make connections to future climate literacy. Climate change is a complex combination of topics, the basics of which even many adults are challenged to understand. So in this module, we'll be presenting basic concepts, including weather and the seasons, plant life cycles and phenology, and how plants respond to their environment in ways that are developmentally appropriate for younger children and that are also prerequisites for developing a more sophisticated understanding of climate change. For example, if one does not understand that weather is immediate and variable while seasonal change is consistent across years, understanding climate as a long-term phenomenon becomes really problematic. We'll then consider how to engage younger children in thinking about how they personally can impact their surroundings, including the natural environment, to illustrate how our actions can have either a positive or negative impact. Because there are certain concepts that children understand at each developmental level, in order to illustrate the different approaches to engaging children with this content, we'll be taking a more concrete, less theoretical approach than in the 2 previous modules. Understanding longer-term time spans can be a challenge for younger audiences. So one way to help them put natural events in context is by connecting ecological concepts with the things that they're familiar with. Seasonally important things that they do on a regular basis, like going to school or going swimming in the summer, or with big events in their lives, such as birthdays or holidays. This approach is grounded in place-based and asset-based educational theory, in which learning is rooted in what is local and relevant to the learner, including the unique history, environment, culture, literature, and art of the community, as well as the learner's day-to-day activities and experiences. The place could be a schoolyard, a backyard, a home, a park, or a botanic garden, depending on the learning context. The approach is hands-on and always related to something in the real world. Successful place-based programs involve students as participants in the life of their communities. Making connections between seasonal change and personal and community events can provide a familiar context for introducing new information, for example, seasonal impacts on plants and animals. Place-based education leverages locally relevant contexts, cultures, and connections with the natural world. These connections will differ with the context in which programs are delivered. So whether they're delivered in a garden, a school, or other location, the type of program children are participating, whether it's in a formal or informal context, or with or without caregivers, the community in which the programs take place, urban, rural, or suburban, and the cultural background of your audience. So place-based programs that cover the same content could look very, very different from location to location and audience to audience. So as you think about how to engage the children in your community, you'll also want to consider their context and adapt your activities accordingly. So thinking about place-based, you can also make connections between seasonal changes and events that children are familiar with throughout the year. You can use that as a way to introduce the difference between weather and more consistent climate patterns. You can connect seasonal changes to the school year calendar, holidays, appropriate clothing, a snow jacket versus shorts, for example, or seasonal recreational activities like swimming or ice skating. Children may also be aware of seasonal biological events such as spring bloom, migrating birds, or falling leaves. Specific events, activities, or connections will differ depending on your local climate and context. For example, children in the tropics may be more familiar with wet, dry seasonal changes, while children in temperate zones will be more attuned to changes in temperature. As I was saying, the variability of weather can really be highlighted by engaging children in conversation about what they've experienced in the recent past. And I was saying that they don't necessarily have a good sense of long-term temporal events, you know, what happens or will happen 6 months or a year from now, but they have an easier time with common everyday habits. So in introducing weather variability, you can focus on what's going on in the current season. So prompting them to think about how the weather today is different from the weather yesterday, with changes in temperature and precipitation and wind and clouds and all those kinds of things. If you have the benefit of seeing the same children for multiple sessions, you can even have them make a simple observations of daily weather over a period of time, and at the end, discuss the similarities and differences. So in the summer, for example, you won't see freezing temperatures, but it isn't exactly the same temperature every day, nor is the precipitation the same. So while it's clear even to the youngest children that animals are alive, because they're able to move independently and react to environmental stimuli, plants respond less perceptibly, and so are sometimes not as prominent in children's frameworks of living things. However, by highlighting the ways that plants in a child's immediate surroundings change over the seasons and inviting them to make connections between what plants need to live and grow and what they personally need to live and grow, children can be more aware of the living world around them. Children in almost every community will have some kind of exposure to plant life. Even children in very urban settings may see plants in pots, in window boxes or on door stoops, single trees decorating streets, or have access to local parks. Plants or weeds can even be found growing between sidewalk tiles or in vacant lots. In contrast, rural children may be more familiar with agricultural crops than wild plant communities. So you'll really want to begin by finding out what plants your audience is familiar with and where they grow to make that connection. And again, connecting to what children know can be an effective way to help communicate new information. So drawing parallels between what children need to grow and be healthy, food, water, and vitamins and minerals, with what plants need to grow, water, sunlight, and the nutrients in the soil, can help highlight that plants are alive and need similar things to survive as they do. And if you're working with a group of children for which it's appropriate, you can also introduce photosynthesis as the process by which plants make their food from sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide. You might also discuss how plants get what they need to live. So introducing plant parts and the plant life cycle, connecting each part of the plant with a different living or growing function. So plants get their water and nutrients through their roots, food is made in the leaves, fruits are where the plant seeds are found, and the seeds are the new baby plants. As an activity, you might either lead a plant part scavenger hunt to find each plant part, or you can do a seed dissection to show children the new baby plant. And for an easy seed dissection activity, all you really need is a bag of multi-beam dried beans soaked overnight. And once they're soaked, the seed parts will easily separate into the coat and the cotyledon, and you'll be able to see the little baby stem and leaves inside. We find that lima beans work especially well because of their size, but the multi-bean bag lets children compare parts across different seed types. And if you need to do this activity on short notice, there is definitely a microwave cheat. You can put the beans in water in the microwave on high for 5 minutes and then let them soak in hot water for an hour. And the results aren't quite as good, but it will soften the beans up enough to separate. So having children act out the plant life cycle can also help them understand that there is a sequence in which these stages occur. Building on that, to recognize that why climate change is an ecological concern, children also need to understand not only that plants are living things, but that plants and animals and humans are dependent on their environment and respond to its changes. So like seasonal change and plant life cycles, these concepts can also be introduced by making comparisons between what children know and do in their daily lives and what animals and plants do in similar circumstances, and then drawing attention to the similarities and differences. And you can build on previous discussions of seasonal change if you have that opportunity, and of the plant life cycle, or you can introduce the concepts independently using similar strategies. So highlighting seasonal differences and having children talk about how their activities differ in each. You can have children think about what animals do during different seasons to illustrate how they, like the children, respond to changes in their environment. In the winter, rather than going inside or putting on a coat, animals have different ways of coping with environmental change. They can hibernate, they can migrate, or they can fatten up for the winter to keep warm and ensure that they have enough food stores. In the summer, if it gets too hot, they might cool off in the water or pant rather than turning on the air conditioning. Plants have even more limited options since they can't get up and move their location. Many plants have adapted for cold temperatures in obvious ways that allow you to make comparisons, going dormant in the winter and losing their leaves until spring. If you are in a tropical or desert location, a lot of those plants have visible adaptations to extreme moisture and heat with drip tips and fleshy stems. And prairie plants, for example, have very deep roots that help them survive hot, dry Midwest summers. However, many temperate plants are not prepared for extreme summer temperatures or droughts that are the result of changing climates. So children may have observed how plants and animals prepare in different seasons. In temperate climates in the fall, they might observe squirrels burying acorns, geese flying south for the winter, or leaves turning color and falling. So you can ask children how do they prepare for the winter? Do they take out a heavy coat out of storage? Do they get out sweaters and long pants? And you can have children reflect on how plants and animals might prepare for the summer as well as the winter. And what children do to prepare for the different seasons, what animals and plants they observe do, will differ by region. So you'll want to consider your own particular climate and ecology as you think about the kinds of comparisons that will resonate with the children that you're working with. One way of illustrating how plants are impacted by their environment, and in particular respond to seasonal changes, again, the type of change will depend on your local climate, is through observing plant phenology. And phenology, translated from the Latin, is the science of appearance, and scientifically refers to the timing of life cycle events. So for plants, that means when they sprout, leaf out, flower, fruit, and senesce. Every child, no matter how young, can see when flowers start to bloom in the spring or notices when leaves start turning in the fall. Though each climate and location will have its own phenological calendar, with plants responding to local seasonal change, connecting plant phenology to personally or culturally relevant events can be a really good way of introducing to the impacts of environmental change on plants. Particularly because the vast majority of plants respond to temperature as a trigger for those life cycle events. Not all plants do, but many, many plants do, and so that comparison is a really good way of introducing children to the impact of environmental change. So one program that does an exceptional job of making these connections is Project Budburst. And Project Budburst is a national citizen science project designed to engage the general public, including children, families, teachers, students, and adults, in understanding how plants respond to climate change by making observations of phenological events for over 250 different species and making that data available to participants and researchers alike. In recognition of the different developmental needs of young children, Project Budburst has developed the Budburst Buddies program, which introduces children to plant phenology and the seasons through storytelling. In this story, a grandparent reflects on the changes in the timing of phenological events and uses these to tell a story about the seasons and how climate has changed over time. And though Budburst Buddies is web-based, you can adapt this storytelling approach to hands-on learning activities and provide parents then with information on Budburst Buddies so they can continue the exploration with their children at home. As noted earlier, you can begin the discussion by connecting plant phenology with things that our children are familiar with. So, as I said, most plants are sensitive to temperature and start growing in the spring when the temperature warms. And this can be a basis for conversation about how plants, like children, know when spring has arrived, connecting the season to biological events they might notice, like flowers blooming, to personal events like wearing shorts or getting ready for the summer. Phenology wheels are one really effective way to structure this kind of activity. A phenology wheel is a circular journal or calendar that chronicles personal, biological, and seasonal events over time. So observations of what happens in the lives of plants and animals over time begins to tell their story. And aligning these events with those in children's lives allow them to really create a shared story that includes all living things. You can use a paper plate or a circular piece of paper or cardboard. The first thing you do is divide it into rings like a target. And the outside ring, or rings in this example, represents time. And each inner ring represents a type of observation, whether you're observing a plant phenology or you are keeping track of what the children do at each time of year and each month. And you can be really creative here in the kinds of observations that you're having children make. Then you can use those units of time to divide the circle into a pie. So there's a place to record each type of observation for each time period. You can make a shared phenology wheel, filling it out during a group discussion and asking for contributions from each child. Or with older children, you can have them create their own phenology wheel or work in small groups. If you have children over many sessions, this can be a long-term project. So you can have them make observations each session or each month or each season and complete the appropriate section as it occurs. So at the end of the year, you'll have a complete phenological record. The circle really emphasizes the cyclical nature of seasons and biological events and events that take place in children's lives and aligns those observations. So placing the same events in a circular journal or wheel shape really helps illuminate patterns over time. And you can find instructions on how to create your own phenology wheels and some really nice examples at the Partners in Place website, and the URL is in the PowerPoint that we'll share tomorrow or very shortly. And they even have a section in the gallery dedicated to children's phenology wheels specifically, and that's where this example came from. So we're going to switch gears a bit now from focusing on, Okay, we're going to switch gears now from focusing on natural phenomenon to our role in the natural world. So a distinct, though essential concept that's needed to develop an understanding of climate change, and more specifically our role in addressing it, is the recognition that not only are we impacted by our environment, but that we also have the power to impact it. And in fact, we do so in many ways. So for the purposes of this discussion, we're defining environment as all the things in the natural and the built world that influence the lives and activities of people, plants, and animals. So we're taking a really broad view of the environment. With children, rather than talking about their environment, we talk about where they go and what they do every day and the things around them. Since they haven't really yet developed a strong capacity for abstract thinking, focusing on the immediate effects of their actions can be a really powerful way to engage them. Things like, really mundane things that we all talk about every day, so things like littering or turning off faucets and lights that are really visible and concrete, offer a good context for discussing how we can impact our environment in positive and negative ways. Likewise, activities like gardening, whether it's an in-ground or container garden, can create a sense of empowerment and positive impact. And though the impact and benefits of things like biking and walking are a bit more abstract, older children certainly will know that cars and factories emit exhaust and that it's harmful to breathe. And these same conversations can frame a discussion of how children can help conserve nature and resources. A discussion about trash and the problems of littering can transition into a discussion of recycling and how recycling is good for the environment, because the more we recycle, the fewer resources we use and the less waste we generate. Likewise, conversations about water or turning off lights can lead to concrete actions that let children become and feel like they are part of the solution. For example, in a school or home context, you might assign a classroom or family light monitor, so a child who's responsible for making sure all the lights are turned off when they leave a room. In a garden context, one activity that highlights both recycling and conservation, in addition to being really engaging for young children, is vermicomposting. Children love the idea that their trash, eaten and excreted by worms, can become black gold, that worm poo is something that really helps plants grow, and they also love interacting with the worms themselves. Worm bins are really easy to make and maintain. So for the bin, you can use an 8 to 10 gallon large plastic container, something you get at Target or Home Depot or any of those kinds of stores. You make 1/4-inch holes in the top for ventilation. Fill the bin with about 1/4 shredded newspaper and 1/4 soil. It should be moist but not wet. And you add your worms and some vegetable scraps for food. And we use red wigglers that we order from California because they eat a lot and they can't survive in the Illinois climate outside of the worm bins. One of the things that I really wanted to point out is that a lot of these direct actions that people talk about, like turning off the lights and those kinds of things, are really downplayed in discussions about addressing climate change broadly, sort of in an adult context, because they have a limited impact when they're carried out on an individual basis. But they do provide a really good way of empowering children for just this reason, is because they are things that children can do that make them a part of the solution. So just to conclude, in this module, we've covered a variety of topics that are important in creating the grounding and basis for children's future understanding of climate and climate change and its impact on the environment. By introducing children to nature and to these developmentally appropriate concepts early, we're taking the first step in ensuring that the next generation grows up with an understanding of our place in the natural world, responsibility for conserving our natural world, and really laying the groundwork for the next generation of responsible citizens. And in closing, I just want to share a video, and this is a video, some comments from Caroline Lewis, who is a climate education advocate and the founder of the CLIO Institute out of Florida. And she just does some really amazing things, and she has just a couple of words that she's going to share.
Trying to reach our youngest audiences, ages 5 to 8, is crucially important. These little kids have what I would call fire in their belly when they understand something that is urgent and in need of solution. That's our task. As educators in a public garden world where we use plants as the basis for all forms of life on Earth and for just about everything we humans use, we need to communicate both the urgency of climate change and the fact that the solutions are at our fingertips. And the youngest of our learners can accept and absorb that and come up with the solutions like nobody else. I remember one little boy, I was speaking to a class, and when I explained carbon pollution as the essence of the problem, and this carbon in the air is trapping gases, his solution was, well, Miss, why don't we get rockets to pick up the carbon from Earth and take it up to Mars? Already problem solving. So the idea is to get kids to think about carbon pollution and climate change in whatever way you can, however you're comfortable. I find great response from using the parts per million argument. I tell them if I got 1,000,000 molecules from the atmosphere, I would have a bottle looking like this, where the yellow is nitrogen and the red is oxygen. Everything else is small. But I have them focus on the carbon molecules that are here. The carbon molecules in this are white. The fact that we have 400 of them now means we have much more than we need. And we're heading to 500. So they understand that while we need some CO2, we don't need as much as we're sending up there. And the kids understand plants' role in making sure that we don't pass that boundary. In addition, having young students empowered to solve this problem, how to explain climate change, how to understand their role, really important. So we lend them these handheld cameras. This is a toggle switch, 2 hours, and we turn it on just like this and plug it into the computer and download their videos. So we let them take these home overnight once the family has practiced their responses. 2-minute video responses. What is climate change all about? What's our role? Nothing could be more empowering for young people. So you find your way of making sure that students understand climate change, carbon pollution, the role of plants, and how they are agents of change and part of the solution. We all will make a difference when we take this on collectively. Thank you for your part today, and here's to a wonderful, bright future where we're all engaged.